they, run into issues. An example of this is in my mind is the App Store review policy that changed a couple of years ago that if you are running an iOS review beta, you cannot leave a review in the App Store. A man have it on my I'm running, I've had us on my iPod Pro and I've go a couple of laps that basically crashed at launch sure crash on a pretty regular basis. Freshwater turtles around the world are declining. And so researchers aren't going out and euthanizing turtles and putting them into museum collections on a regular basis. We do that for lots of other species, but people aren't going to be doing that for turtles because it's just not the right thing to do from a conservation perspective. Red-eared sliders are native to the southern US and northern Mexico, but because they're so popular in the pet trade, they've become invasive on every continent except for Antarctica. As conservationists remove red-eared sliders from natural ecosystems, researchers like Polly can study them as proxies for native species. By seeing how much plastic the red-eared sliders from the U.S. Davis Arboretum are swallowing, he can get an idea of how much plastic the native western pond turtles may be ingesting as well. The researchers found bits of plastic in 5 of 65 turtles, or 8%. They used a technique called Raman spectroscopy to confirm that it really was plastic and not, say, bits of crayfish exoskeletons. That's what allowed us to determine that one of the plastic was a nitrile glove. They also identified bits of plastic shopping bags and chunks of plastic cutlery. Somewhere something external drive yes, so I had it in a 12-inch MacBook, the first generation 12-inch MacBook, and I sort of gave up on that machine is slow, and with that, they have Mac OS on it was really struggling, and so I moved it to an external SSD, and now I'm booting my 15-inch MacBook Pro from it and doing that, and then my iPad Pro yesterday I put the iPad iOS public beta on it. I really like the feature. I think there is a lot of really interesting stuff in iPad iOS, but it's a pretty rough around the edges. Greenland is the biggest island in the world. And the ice sheet that site atop is massive. The pile of ice is so thick, it extends more than 10,000 feet above the ocean. And if all that ice were to melt and go into the ocean, global sea levels would rise by 24 feet everywhere around the world. Jason Briner, a geologist at the University at Buffalo. The ice sheet is melting, of course. But just how much, compared to the past? Briner's tram did a computer simulation of the southwest portion of the Greenland ice sheet, which he says a good proxy for ice melt across the entire ice sheet. Bricks are one of the oldest No-2N building materials, dating back thousands of years. But researchers at Washington University, in St. Louis, have found a new use for bricks, as energy storage units. A team of engineers and chemists have found a way to transform an ordinary house brick into a pseudo-battery, allowing it to conduct and store electricity. The bricks are powerful enough to illuminate an LED light bulb and cost only about $3 to make. Charles Darwin is most famous for his finches, from whose beaks he gleaned the idea that a single species might radiate into many. But he studied other attributes of birds, too, like the rhythmic sounds some species made during courtship by fluttering, shaking, or rattling their feathers together. Since Darwin, there's been this fact that birds produce sounds with wings and tails or flight features. So there's species of manakins that do this sound. There's hummingbirds that do this sound. The results appear in the journal Nature. Ultimately, it's up to us how much ice actually melts. Humanity has the knob, the carbon knob, and that knob is going to influence the rates of ice loss from the Greenland ice sheet. If the world goes the net carbon zero by 2100, for example, Briner says ice loss could stop entirely at the end of century, according to one modal. That was what kept me from being completely depressed about our study. Dozens of countries have already announced goals to go net zero by the end of the century, so far the U.S. is not one of them. The study is the journal Lancet Oncology. Evans says the research introduces a new way to study paleopathology in the fossil record. This discovery definitely takes dinosaurs, which we often think of as almost mythical, powerful creatures, and I think it shows that they were real animals. And it's really unique and sobering that they got disease similar to the ones that humans get today. And they would have suffered greatly from these diseases, and so it brings them to life in a really unusual way. That's something we'd love to examine, whether the local ecosystem and the associated organisms with the sloth, perhaps that changes? A lot of organisms can't readily change their day-to-night activity. You know, their survival strategy is based on one or the other, so it may well be that change or that association with daytime as opposed to nighttime, or cathemerality, does change some of the organisms that are associated with it. Duffield's most important piece of equipment for this research may be a comfortable chair.